The crystal towers of Velthar Prime stretched into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Their surfaces caught the light of 3 suns and threw it back in dancing patterns across the great plaza below. Commander Quan stood on the observation deck of his ship watching the towers shine. He had seen this sight 100 times, but it never got old. The Galactic Council met in those towers, 12 ancient species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Each species lived for centuries or millennia. Some never died at all. They were wise and powerful and controlled more than 1,000 worlds across the galaxy. But today they were telling stories like children. Quan shook his head as he listened to the council meeting through his comm system. Elder Vex of the Crystalline Collective was speaking in his slow crystal voice about the old legends. The same legends they always talked about when they had nothing important to discuss. The mortals. According to the stories, these mortals were a strange race that lived on a world of water and stone. They aged and died in just a few decades. Their bodies were weak and soft. They had no special powers like telepathy or energy manipulation. They could not live in space without machines to help them breathe. Yet the legends claimed these short-lived creatures had done impossible things. They built great cities and flew between stars. They fought wars that lasted longer than their own lifespans. Some stories even said they had once challenged the council itself. Complete nonsense, of course. Lieutenant Yuna walked up beside Quan on the observation deck. She was young for her species, only 300 years old. Her skin had the pale blue tint of the Veltharian people, and her large dark eyes held curiosity about everything. "Commander, the council meeting is getting interesting," she said. Quan laughed. "Interesting is not the word I would use. They are telling fairy tales again." Yuna pulled out her data tablet and showed him something. "But sir, I have been studying the old archives. There are coordinates mentioned in some of the oldest records. A place called the Sol sector." Quan looked at the coordinates on her tablet. He had never heard of that sector before. The numbers showed it was far out on the rim of the galaxy in an area marked as forbidden space. "Why is it forbidden?" he asked. "That is the strange part," Yuna said. "The records show it has been quarantined for 3,000 years. But there is no explanation for why. The files just say dangerous area, do not approach." Quan frowned. A 3,000-year quarantine with no explanation was unusual. The council kept detailed records of everything. They documented every threat, every dangerous species, every forbidden technology. But this Sol sector had almost no information at all. "Maybe there is nothing there," he said. "Maybe it was just marked forbidden and then forgotten." But Yuna shook her head. "Commander, there are automated sentinel stations around the entire sector. Hundreds of them. Someone built a wall around that space and they are still maintaining it." This was news to Quan. Sentinel stations required regular maintenance and fuel. Someone was spending resources to keep whatever was in that sector locked away. But who and why? He was about to ask Yuna more questions when alarms started ringing across the ship. The bridge crew immediately went to battle stations. Quan and Yuna rushed to the command center to see what was happening. "Captain, the sensors are picking up movement in deep space," Lieutenant Ray reported from her station. "Multiple large objects on the edge of our scanning range." Quan sat in his command chair and brought up the sensor display on the main screen. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the normal background of stars and empty space. But then he noticed them. Dark shapes moving between the stars. They were too far away to get clear readings, but they were definitely artificial. "How many objects?" Quan asked. The sensor officer checked his instruments. "At least 50, sir. Maybe more. They are moving in formation." A formation of 50 ships was either a trade convoy or a military fleet, but there were no scheduled convoys in this area, and no military exercises planned either. "Can you identify the ship types?" Quan asked. "Negative, sir. The designs do not match anything in our databases. The shapes are wrong. Too smooth. Too streamlined." Yuna was studying her own tablet and her face had gone pale. "Commander," she said quietly, "those ships are moving toward the Sol sector." Quan felt a chill run down his spine. Unknown ships heading toward forbidden space could not be a coincidence. Either someone was planning to break the quarantine or something was planning to break out. He opened a communication channel to Fleet Command. "This is Commander Quan of the patrol ship Starlight. We have detected unknown vessels approaching the Sol quarantine zone. Request immediate backup and instructions." The reply came back quickly. Commander Quan, you are ordered to maintain surveillance from a safe distance. Do not approach the unknown vessels. The Grand Fleet is being notified. Quan acknowledged the orders, but he was not satisfied. Safe distance was a relative term when dealing with unknown technology, and surveillance would be difficult if the ships entered the quarantine zone where his sensors could not follow. Lieutenant Yuna was still studying the old records on her tablet. She looked up with worry in her large dark eyes. Commander, I found something else in the archives. The last entry about the Sol sector. It is from exactly 3,000 years ago. What does it say? Quan asked. It is just one line, sir. Mortal threat contained. Never again. The word sent another chill through Quan. Mortal threat. The same word used in the old legends about the strange, short-lived race. Was there a connection between the fairy tales and the forbidden sector? On the main screen, the dark shapes continued their steady approach toward the quarantine zone. Whatever was about to happen, Quan had the feeling that the galaxy was about to learn, whether mortals were just stories or whether stories could become real. The crystal towers of Velthar Prime continued to shine in the light of 3 suns. But somehow their light seemed dimmer now, as if shadows were growing in the space between the stars. The underground halls of Neo Geneva stretched deep into the earth like a giant metal anthill. Admiral Minho walked through the corridors with heavy steps. His black uniform bore the marks of many years in service. Scars crossed his weathered face, telling stories of battles fought in the dark between stars. The United Earth Defense Council waited for him in the Great Chamber. 20 leaders from every remaining nation sat around a circular table made of polished steel. Above them, screens showed images of Earth from space. The blue marble that had once been home to billions now supported only a few 100 million souls. 3,000 years had passed since the Great Silence. The day when all alien contact suddenly stopped. No more trade ships arriving from distant worlds. No more messages from the Galactic Council. No more visits from the strange beings who had once walked among humans as friends and teachers. Humanity had assumed they were alone. Abandoned by their alien allies, forgotten by the galaxy, they spent centuries wondering what they had done wrong. Why had their friends left them behind? But now they knew the truth. Dr. Hana stood beside a massive holographic display showing ancient alien text. She was small and thin with short black hair and tired eyes that had spent too many years studying old records. Her fingers moved across a control pad, bringing up new images of alien writing. Admiral, the translation is complete, she said. Her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. We now know why the aliens stopped coming to Earth. The council members leaned forward in their chairs. They had waited months for these answers. Dr. Hana had been working day and night to decode the alien archives that their deep space probes had finally managed to steal from abandoned council outposts. Tell us what you found, Admiral Minho, said Dr. Hana, touched her. Control pad and the alien text changed into human words. The truth appeared on the screen for everyone to read. They did not abandon us, she said. They quarantined us. Silence filled the chamber. The word quarantine hit the council members like a physical blow. Quarantines were for diseases, for dangerous things that needed to be contained. The records show that early contact between humans and the Galactic Council went badly. Dr. Hana continued. There was a war. A short one by galactic standards, but it terrified them. Humans fought with what they called desperate madness. We used tactics they had never seen before. We sacrificed entire fleets to achieve small victories. Admiral Minho felt his jaw tighten. His ancestors had fought those battles, died in those battles, and the aliens had been so frightened that they built a wall around Earth. They marked our entire solar system as forbidden space, Dr. Hana said. Then they spread stories about us. False stories designed to make other species think humans were just myths, legends that could not possibly be real. Captain June stepped forward from where he had been standing near the wall. He was young and eager with bright eyes that burned with anger at this betrayal. His ship, the UES Indomitable, waited in orbit above Earth ready for orders. So they made us into fairy tales, he said. While we thought we were abandoned, they were telling the galaxy we never existed. Worse than that, Dr. Hana replied. She brought up new images on the display. These are recent intelligence reports from our long-range scouts. The Council has been monitoring the quarantine zone for 3,000 years. They have been watching us rebuild, learning about our technology, studying our population numbers. Admiral Minho studied the images. They showed alien sensor stations positioned just outside the solar system, automated watchers that had been reporting on human activities for millennia. They know we survived, he said. Yes, Dr. Hana nodded. And they know we have grown stronger. Our technology has advanced far beyond what it was during the First Contact War. We have developed new weapons, new ships, new ways of fighting that they have never seen. Commander Soyi entered the chamber at that moment. She led the Special Forces Division, and her black combat armor bore the marks of many secret missions. Her face was hard as stone, and her eyes held the cold fire of a professional soldier. Admiral, she said, our deep cover agents have intercepted Council communications. They are planning something big. What kind of something? Admiral Minho asked. The Council believes we are nearly extinct, Commander Soyi replied. Their records show human population declining over the centuries. They think maybe a few thousand survivors remain hiding in underground bunkers. They see Earth as ready for reclamation. The words hit the Council chamber like an explosion. Reclamation meant the aliens planned to take Earth for themselves. They would move in and settle on humanity's homeworld, thinking there would be no real resistance. How wrong they were. Admiral Minho stood up slowly. His tall frame cast shadows across the steel table. Every person in the room looked at him, waiting for his decision. The choice that would determine the future of the human race. Dr. Hana spoke quietly. Admiral, there is something else. The records show that Council fleets are already moving toward our sector. They plan to disable the quarantine stations and move in within the next few months. Captain June stepped forward again. His hand rested on the weapon at his side. Admiral, we cannot let them take our world. We have to fight. Commander Soyi nodded agreement. Sir, our forces are ready. We have been preparing for this day even without knowing it would come. 3,000 years of isolation have made us strong. We have weapons and tactics the Council has never encountered. Admiral Minho looked around the chamber at the faces of Earth's leaders. He saw fear in some eyes, anger in others. But in all of them he saw the same burning determination that had carried humanity through 3 millennia of darkness. They want to know if mortals are real, he said finally. His voice carried across the chamber like rolling thunder. They spread stories about us to keep the galaxy from looking for us. They turned us into myths to contain us. He paused, and his scarred face hardened into a mask of resolve. Let us show them that myths can become reality, he said. Let us show them what mortals can do when they fight for their home. The Council chamber erupted in agreement. Voices rose as plans began to form. Orders were given. Ships were prepared. The sleeping giant of Earth was finally waking up, and the galaxy would soon learn that some stories were more dangerous than truth. The Sentinel stations had guarded the Sol system for 3,000 years. They hung in the void like metal guardians watching over forbidden space. Each station was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons and sensors that could destroy any ship that dared approach. Sentinel Commander Nara stood on the bridge of her flagship studying the ancient barrier. She commanded a colonization fleet of 200 ships. Her people, the Zephyrians, had waited centuries for permission to claim new worlds. The Council had finally decided that Earth was safe to reclaim. The mortals were extinct, after all. The sensor readings showed only empty cities and dead oceans. A few scattered life signs that were probably just animals. Nothing that could threaten a proper colonization force. Nara was old even by Zephyrian standards. She had lived for over 2,000 years and commanded fleets across half the galaxy. Her silver skin gleamed under the bridge lights, and her forearms moved gracefully as she worked the control systems. Captain, we are approaching the outer Sentinel line, her navigator reported. The stations are beginning their challenge protocols. Good, Nara replied. Send the Council authorization codes. The Sentinel should allow us passage to begin planetary surveys. But something was wrong. Instead of acknowledging the codes, the Sentinel stations began powering up their weapons. Red warning lights flashed across their hulls. Energy readings spiked to dangerous levels. Captain, the Sentinels are not responding to our codes, the communications officer called out. They are targeting our ships, Nara frowned. The Sentinel network should have been updated with their mission parameters. The stations were supposed to allow Council ships to pass while keeping everyone else out. She was about to order her fleet to back away when space exploded into nuclear fire. The Sentinel stations detonated in a chain reaction that lit up the darkness. One after another, the ancient guardians destroyed themselves in balls of white-hot plasma. The explosions were perfectly timed to create gaps in the barrier, while blinding the Zephyrian sensors with electromagnetic interference. What is happening? Nara shouted over the alarms. Her bridge crew scrambled to understand what they were seeing. "Captain, unknown ships are coming through the breach," the sensor officer reported. His voice carried shock and fear. They were hiding behind the sentinel explosions. On the main screen, dark shapes emerged from the flames. Ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were sleek and angular with no wasted curves or decorative elements. Every line spoke of pure function designed for one purpose: war. Major Guan led the first wave of human stealth ships through the chaos. His vessel, the Shadow Strike, was barely visible even to his own sensors. The humans had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of moving unseen. They had studied every alien technology they could steal and built something new. Behind him, 20 more stealth ships followed in perfect formation. Each one carried weapons that the Council had never encountered. Fusion rockets that burned hotter than stars, railguns that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, quantum torpedoes that could tear holes in space itself. "All stealth units, this is Major Guan," he spoke into his comm system. "Execute Operation Mythbreaker. Show them that fairy tales have teeth." The human ships struck the Zephyrian fleet like invisible lightning. Torpedoes appeared from nowhere to tear through alien hulls. Energy beams lanced out from empty space to cut ships in half. The Zephyrians had no time to react before half their fleet was burning wreckage. Captain Yoon coordinated the cyber attack from her command ship deep in the Sol system. She was young and brilliant with fingers that danced across holographic keyboards like a master pianist. Her team had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. The alien ships used quantum communication networks that they thought were impossible to hack. But the humans had been studying captured alien technology for centuries. They knew every weakness, every backdoor, every security flaw. "Target their navigation systems first," Captain Yoon ordered her team. "Make them fly blind, then hit their weapons. Turn their own guns against each other." Across the Zephyrian fleet, command systems began failing. Ships lost control of their engines and drifted into each other. Weapons turrets turned on their own vessels. Communication networks filled with false orders that sent ships fleeing in panic. Commander Quan arrived with his patrol fleet just as the battle reached its peak. He had been racing toward the Sol system ever since the Sentinel explosions lit up space. What he found there defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans fought with a desperation that made no tactical sense. Pilot Ray of the Human Fighter Corps watched her wingman get surrounded by 3 Zephyrian interceptors. Instead of retreating to fight another day, she flew her ship directly into the nearest enemy cruiser. The impact tore both ships apart in a ball of fire. But the explosion cleared a path for her wingman to escape and rejoin the fight. She had traded her life for a single tactical advantage. Lieutenant Yuna stared at the battle displays in shock. "Commander," she said, "they are not fighting to win. They are fighting like they have nothing to lose." Quan understood. These mortals with their brief lives saw death differently than immortal species. A Zephyrian who lived for thousands of years would never sacrifice themselves for such a small gain. But to a human who only lived for decades, every moment of freedom was worth dying for. The battle lasted only 3 hours. When it was over, the Zephyrian colonization fleet was scattered wreckage drifting in space. Less than 30 ships limped away from the carnage with tales of impossible enemies who appeared from nowhere and fought like demons. Sentinel Commander. Nara survived because her flagship was at the rear of the formation. She watched the slaughter with growing horror as her proud fleet was destroyed by ghosts and shadows. A human transmission came through on all frequencies. The voice was calm and cold like winter wind. "This is Admiral Minho of the United Earth Defense Force," he said. "For 3,000 years you have kept us locked away like animals in a cage. You turned us into stories to hide your fear. But stories have power, Commander. And now your fairy tale has come to life." The transmission ended, leaving only empty space and drifting wreckage. Nara looked at the coordinates where Earth hung in the darkness. A blue marble that had seemed so harmless from a distance. Now she knew the truth that the Council had tried so hard to hide. The mortals were not extinct. They were not weak. They were the most dangerous thing in the galaxy because they had nothing left to lose, and they were very, very angry. The crystal halls of the Galactic Council shook with shouting voices. Emergency sessions had been called across all 12 member worlds. Holographic displays showed the same terrible images over and over. Ships burning in space. Ancient sentinel stations exploding like dying stars. A colonization fleet reduced to scrap metal in just 3 hours. Counselor Tay of the Zephyrian Empire slammed his 4 fists on the council table. His silver skin had turned dark with rage. The mortals had destroyed an entire fleet. His people were demanding answers that he could not give. "How is this possible?" he roared. The intelligence report said they were nearly extinct. A few thousand survivors hiding in caves. Where did this fleet come from? Elder Vex of the Crystalline Collective spoke in his slow crystal voice. His body looked like living diamond and his words rang like bells. "Perhaps our intelligence was wrong. Perhaps we have been watching empty cities while the mortals built their strength elsewhere." Counselor Nyx of the Shadow Realm flickered in and out of visibility as emotions disturbed his energy form. His people lived between dimensions and rarely cared about physical conflicts. But even he seemed worried about these new developments. "The humans have technology we do not recognize," he said. "Their ships move too fast. Their weapons burn too hot. They fight in ways that make no sense to tactical computers." High Marshal Jex of the warrior clans nodded agreement. His people were the finest soldiers in the galaxy, trained from birth for combat. But even they had never seen anything like the human attack patterns. "They sacrifice individual units to gain small advantages," he said. "No rational commander would trade ships that way. The losses outweigh the tactical gains by any reasonable calculation." But the mortals did not use reasonable calculations. They used desperation mathematics where freedom was worth more than survival, where principles mattered more than probability of success. Counselor Tay brought up new intelligence reports on the main display. The news was getting worse by the hour. 17 council outposts had gone silent in the past day. All of them reported strange ship contacts just before communications ended. "They are not just defending their home system," he said. "They are attacking us across the entire sector." The council chamber fell silent as members studied the tactical displays. Red marks showed where human forces had struck. The pattern made no sense. The attacks were scattered across hundreds of light years, hitting targets that seemed random. Admiral Minho watched the same tactical displays from his command ship Defiance. But he saw a different pattern than the confused aliens. Each target had been carefully chosen. Each attack served a larger purpose. Agent Bin stood beside the Admiral reporting on the infiltration missions. She was small and quiet with eyes that missed nothing. Her teams had been preparing for this moment for decades. "Sir, the nanite swarms are in position," she said. "We have seeded their core worlds with microscopic machines that can take control of any electronic system. When you give the order, we can turn their own cities against them." Specialist Ara worked at a computer station nearby. Her fingers flew across holographic keyboards as she planted viruses in council communication networks. The aliens had no idea that every message they sent was being read, copied, and turned into weapons. "Admiral, the enemy command codes have been compromised," she reported. "We can now issue false orders to their fleets. Make them think attacks are coming from directions where no human ships exist." Dr. Hana entered the command center carrying a data pad full of psychological profiles. She had been studying alien behavior patterns for months. Her research would be crucial for the next phase of the plan. "Admiral, the enemy leaders are starting to panic," she said. "They have ruled for thousands of years without facing real opposition. They do not know how to respond to an enemy that ignores conventional tactics." Admiral Minho smiled grimly. The mortals had one advantage that immortal species could never understand. When you only lived for a few decades, every moment had incredible value. Humans fought with the fury of beings who knew their time was limited. "Open a channel to all council frequencies," he ordered. The communication systems connected Admiral Minho to every alien leader in the galaxy. His image appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. His scarred face and cold eyes carried a message that needed no translation. "My name is Admiral Minho of the United Earth Defense Force," he said. His voice was calm but carried the weight of 3,000 years of anger. "You have kept my people locked away like dangerous animals. You spread lies about us to hide your fear. You turned us into fairy tales because you could not face the truth." On distant worlds, alien leaders leaned forward to hear his words. This was the first time a human had spoken to the galaxy in 3 millennia. "The truth is that mortals are everything you were afraid of," he continued. "We do not think in centuries like you do. We think in heartbeats. Every decision matters because we do not have forever to fix our mistakes. Every battle matters because we will not live to fight 1,000 more." Counselor Tay tried to interrupt the transmission, but human hackers had taken control of the communication networks. The Admiral continued speaking. You made us into stories to contain us, he said. But stories, counselor, have a way of becoming real. And this story ends with the fall of your empire. As if summoned by his words, explosions began lighting up the night sky above alien worlds. The nanite swarms activated, turning defense satellites against their own cities. Communication towers collapsed as hidden viruses destroyed their control systems. Traffic control networks failed, sending transport ships crashing into buildings. On the bridge of his ship, Admiral Minho watched reports flood in from across the galaxy. Human strike teams had been positioned for months, waiting for this moment. Now they moved with perfect coordination to cripple the Council infrastructure. The aliens finally understood what they were facing, not just another species seeking territory or resources, but a race that had been forged in the fires of abandonment and betrayal. A people who had spent 3,000 years preparing for this day. The mortals were no longer content to be stories. They were writing a new chapter in galactic history, and it would be written in the blood of those who had tried to erase them. The space above Velthar Prime had become a graveyard of ships. Twisted metal drifted between the crystal towers that had once seemed untouchable. The seat of galactic power was under siege for the first time in 10,000 years. Fleet Admiral Wu commanded the human armada from his flagship Eternal Defiance. His fleet stretched across the solar system like a steel constellation. 500 ships bearing the blue and white colors of United Earth. Each vessel carried weapons that the galaxy had never seen, and crews who fought like their species depended on victory. Because it did, the Council had assembled the largest battle fleet in galactic history to defend their capital world. 3,000 ships from 12 different species hung in formation around the planet, ancient dreadnoughts that had conquered star systems, battle cruisers with weapons that could crack moons, carriers filled with fighter craft that numbered in the millions, but they were losing. Admiral Wu studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. The alien fleet was massive, but it moved like a sleeping giant. Their commanders thought in terms of years and decades. They planned battles like chess games with time to consider every move. Humans planned battles like lightning storms, fast, brutal, and impossible to predict. Commander Soyi led her boarding teams through the corridors of a captured Council dreadnought. Her soldiers moved with deadly precision, cutting through alien defenders who had never faced enemies this aggressive. The ship was 10 times larger than any human vessel, but its crew had no idea how to fight in their own hallways. The Veltharian defenders fired energy weapons that could melt steel. But the humans wore armor that absorbed the beams and turned them into power for their own weapons. They fought with close combat weapons that alien warriors had never encountered. Vibrating blades that cut through any material. Magnetic hammers that crushed armor like paper. "We have secured the bridge," Commander Soyi reported. "The ship is ours." That made 17 capital ships captured in the past hour. The human boarding teams were turning the Council fleet against itself. Every captured vessel became a weapon aimed at its former allies. Engineer Dan worked frantically in the engine room of the human destroyer Vengeance. His ship had been hit by 3 different alien weapon types and should have been dead in space. But Dan kept it running through pure determination and salvaged parts from destroyed enemy ships. The fusion reactor was operating at 200% capacity. The weapon systems were drawing power faster than the generators could supply it. The artificial gravity kept flickering on and off. By every reasonable measure, the ship should have exploded hours ago. But reasonable was not a word humans used in battle. "Captain, give me 5 more minutes," Dan called to the bridge. "I can reroute power from life support to the main guns." "Negative," the captain replied. "We need you breathing, Dan." "Sir, with respect, we need the aliens dead more than we need comfort." The captain laughed grimly and gave permission. Human crews were willing to sacrifice anything for victory. Alien crews who lived for centuries could not understand why mortals cared so little about survival. Lieutenant Yuna found herself face to face with this difference when her ship was captured during the battle. She sat in a human prison cell talking to prisoner specialist 1. The human woman was young with kind eyes, but there was steel underneath her gentle manner. "Why do you fight so hard?" Yuna asked. "You could surrender and live peaceful lives under Council rule. We are not cruel masters. We have governed the galaxy fairly for thousands of years." One smiled sadly. "You do not understand. Peace under your rule is not peace at all. It is death by slow degrees. You would make us into pets, safe, comfortable, and completely powerless. But you will all die in this war," Yuna protested. "Your entire species could be extinct within a generation." One nodded. That is possible. But extinction fighting for freedom is better than survival as slaves. That is something immortal species can never understand. When you have forever, you can always wait for a better opportunity. When you only have decades, you must act now or never. The battle raged for 18 hours. Human ships fought with tactics that seemed born of madness. They used damaged vessels as guided missiles, ramming them into alien formations. They overloaded weapon systems to create explosions that took out multiple enemy ships. They sacrificed entire squadrons to create openings for single decisive strikes. Captain June of the UES Indomitable made the ultimate sacrifice when his ship was surrounded by Council forces. His engines were failing and his weapons were empty. The logical choice was surrender. Instead, he aimed his ship at the Council command station and pushed his engines beyond their limits. The Indomitable accelerated toward the enemy fortress, trailing fire and debris. Alien weapons tore chunks from her hull but could not stop her final charge. "This is Captain June to all human forces," he transmitted. His voice was calm despite the alarm screaming on his bridge. "Remember us. Remember why we fight. Remember that mortals can choose their own destiny." The Indomitable struck the command station at nearly light speed. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. But the alien command network was shattered and their fleet coordination collapsed. Fleet Admiral Wu felt tears on his face as he watched the Indomitable die. Another good ship and crew gone. But their sacrifice had won the battle. The Council fleet was falling apart without central coordination. Human forces pressed their advantage. Strike teams led by Commander Soy captured the remaining command ships. Cyber warfare specialists planted viruses that turned alien weapons against each other. Fighter pilots like Ray Daughter flew impossible missions that no rational pilot would attempt, and slowly, inevitably, the greatest fleet in galactic history crumbled before the fury of mortals who refused to accept defeat. As the last Council ships retreated or surrendered, Fleet Admiral Wu opened communication channels to the planet below. The crystal towers of Velthar Prime still gleamed in the light of 3 suns, but their glow seemed dimmer now. "This is Fleet Admiral Wu of the United Earth Defense Force," he transmitted. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are broken. Surrender now and we will show mercy." But mercy was not something the Council had ever needed to understand. They had ruled through strength for so long that they had forgotten how to lose with grace. Some would learn. Others would fight to the bitter end. The war was far from over. But the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. The mortals had proven that brief lives could burn brighter than eternal ones, and the stars themselves seemed to tremble before that terrible bright flame. The ruins of the Galactic Council chambers told the story of an empire that had thought itself eternal. Broken crystal towers reached toward the sky like grasping fingers. Smoke still rose from the government district where human forces had fought street by street to reach the heart of galactic power. Ambassador. Min walked through the debris wearing the simple blue uniform of United Earth. She carried no weapons and had only a small security detail. The galaxy had learned to fear humans, but she came in peace. Her mission was not conquest, but something far more difficult. She came to build a new future from the ashes of the old order. The surviving alien leaders waited for her in the emergency council chamber. It was a simple metal building erected in the ruins of the Crystal Palace. Gone were the soaring towers and holographic displays that had once proclaimed the Council eternal power. What remained was as fragile as everything else the humans had touched. Admiral Minho sat at her right side. His uniform bore new scars from the final battles, but his eyes held something that had not been there before. Not just victory, but responsibility. The hard task of ruling was just beginning. Dr. Hana had set up displays showing population figures, casualty reports, and economic projections. The numbers told a grim story. 3 years of war had cost both sides millions of lives and countless resources. Entire star systems lay in ruins. Trade networks that had existed for millennia were broken. Councillor Tay was among the few original council members who had survived. His silver skin looked pale and his forearms shook slightly as he spoke. The proud Zephyrian Empire had been reduced to a handful of worlds begging for mercy. "What are your terms?" he asked. His voice carried the weight of defeat. Ambassador Min stood slowly. She had been chosen for this moment because she understood both war and peace. Her father had died in the final assault on Velthar Prime. Her brother commanded one of the human fleets now patrolling former council space. She knew the cost of victory. "There will be no terms of surrender," she said. Her words surprised everyone in the chamber. Instead, there will be a new beginning. A chance to build something better than what came before. She gestured to Dr. Hana, who activated the wall displays. Images showed plans for a new galactic government. Not the rigid hierarchy of the old council, but something more flexible. Something that could adapt and grow. The Galactic Assembly will represent all species equally, she continued. Decisions will be made by majority vote, not by the wisdom of ancient races who claim superiority through age. Every world will have a voice regardless of how long their people live or how much technology they possess. Commander Quan of the former Veltharian fleet leaned forward. His people had been humans' strongest opponents during the war, but he had learned to respect their fighting spirit. "And you will lead this assembly?" he asked. Admiral Minho shook his head. "Humans will have representation equal to our population and territory. Nothing more. We did not fight this war to become your new masters." Lieutenant Yuna, who had been released from human custody, spoke up. Her voice carried confusion and hope in equal measure. "Then why did you fight? What did you hope to gain from all this destruction?" Dr. Hana answered by showing images of Earth before the quarantine, cities full of diverse alien visitors, human ships trading peacefully with distant worlds. The galaxy as it had been before, fear drove the species apart. "We fought for the right to exist," she said. "For 3,000 years you kept us locked away like dangerous animals. You turned us into stories to hide your own fear. We fought to prove that mortals deserve a place among the stars." Xenobiologist Kim stood up from where she had been working with alien scientists. Her research team had been studying the biological and cultural differences between species. Their work would be crucial for building understanding between the races. "We have learned something important during this war," she said. "Each species brings unique strengths to the galaxy. Immortal races provide wisdom and long-term planning. Mortal species bring urgency and innovation. We are stronger together than apart." The chamber fell silent as everyone considered her words. The war had proven that diversity was not weakness but strength. Human tactics had succeeded because they were completely different from anything the immortal species expected. "Commander." Soyai entered the chamber and whispered something to Admiral Minho. Her report made him smile for the first time in months. Around the galaxy, human peacekeeping forces were being welcomed by populations tired of war. Former council worlds were requesting membership in the new assembly, but not everyone was ready for peace. Captain Lee of the reformed Earth Defense Force sent regular reports about resistance movements. Some alien factions still believed they could restore the old order through terrorism and sabotage. "There are those who will never accept the new reality," Ambassador Min said. "They will fight us with bombs and assassins. They will try to restart the war through fear and hatred." Elder Vex spoke in his crystal voice. His people had suffered greatly during the war, but he had come to understand human determination. "Then we must show them a better path, not through force but through example." Counselor Nix flickered in and out of visibility as his energy form stabilized. His Shadow Realm people had lost 3 of their dimensional cities to human quantum weapons. Yet he bore no hatred for his former enemies. "The mortals have taught us something we had forgotten," he said. "The change is not always destruction. Sometimes it is growth. Sometimes the old must die for the new to live." Over the following months, the Galactic Assembly took shape. Species that had been enemies learned to work together. Human urgency balanced alien patience. Mortal innovation combined with immortal wisdom to solve problems that neither could handle alone. Captain June had not lived to see the peace his sacrifice helped create. But his daughter now served as a liaison officer, helping former enemies become allies. His memory lived on in the new generation that would inherit the stars. The crystal towers of Velthar Prime were slowly rebuilt. But the new structures looked different, less imposing, more welcoming. They were designed to house representatives from hundreds of species working together, instead of 12 races ruling over everyone else. Ambassador Min stood in the highest tower looking out at the ships in orbit. Human vessels flew alongside former enemies on joint missions. Children who had been born during the war were growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal. The mortals were no longer myths or fairy tales. They were partners in building a future that none of the species could create alone. Their brief lives brought urgency to decisions that might otherwise be debated for centuries. Admiral Minho joined her at the window. His hair was going gray and new lines marked his face. The burden of leadership aged mortals quickly, but he bore it willingly. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. This peace we have built, Ambassador Min smiled. Nothing lasts forever, Admiral. That is what makes it precious. We must enjoy this peace while we have it and work to make it as long as possible. As the twin suns set behind the rebuilt city, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Each point of light represented worlds where different species were learning to live together, where mortals and immortals shared the same dreams of prosperity and growth. The galaxy had learned a hard truth about the power of stories. Myths could become real when enough people believed in them, but they had also learned something more important. Sometimes the best stories were the ones you wrote together, and in the space between the stars where humans had once been forbidden to travel, new ships carried crews of mixed species exploring the unknown, mortality and immortality working as partners to push the boundaries of what was possible. The age of the Council was over. The age of the Assembly had begun, and the mortals who had once been nothing but tales were now writing the future of the galaxy in stars and hope.